Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Matt here. Today I wanted to discuss and compare these two different camera systems that I've been using in order to film through my scope while still using it normally at the same time. These camera systems have allowed me to show my viewers exactly what I'm seeing through my scope target-wise with the reticle and everything, while still being able to look through my scope and use it as normal. I've had really good feedback ever since I started implementing this type of target overlay footage on my match videos, and these are the two systems that I've used in the past now quite extensively in order to do so. I started off with the TACTACAM system, which is sort of a two-part system that we'll talk about, and I more recently switched to the TRIGGERCAM 2.1, which is this white box here. I've received a lot of questions from people who want to make their own videos as to which system I like better. The 2.1 is more expensive and they asked me if it's worth the money and whatnot, so I thought I'd wrap both systems up into one video and discuss them both at the same time. I have used both these systems quite extensively now, and I have a very good understanding of what I like and don't like about each one, and I will say neither of them are perfect. Although after this video, I will share which one I plan to stick with going forward and which one I plan to sell and part ways with. I was contemplating a little bit how I wanted to format this video because there's a lot of things that I could talk about for a long time, but there's basically four main factors, or I would say the most important factors that I think most people would consider when deciding between these two systems. So that's what I'm going to cover first, are the four sort of deal breakers to me, and then all the other differences that still matter but just not as much I'll talk about afterwards. On your screen you'll see three categories for each camera: pros, cons, and just notes, which are neither pros or cons, and we'll talk about the differences and nuances in each camera system that I've found after using them for quite some time. Before we dive into the discussion though, I do want to start with a general overview of each system very quickly. So the TACTACAM system here, you can see right now, is a camera and a mount. So it's two parts. The camera comes in one box and you have to buy the mount as a separate accessory. The camera here is this cylindrical part. It's basically just a round sport action camera, which can be used in a multitude of different ways. You can mount it onto a bow stabilizer. It comes with a Picatinny rail adapter and whatnot. So it is versatile. However, ever since I purchased it, I mounted it into the FTS mount, which stands for film through scope, and I never removed it. I just took the entire unit on and off my scope as needed because that was all I was concerned about. I only ever use it as a scope camera, so just keep that in mind. Another quick note that I do want to mention about the TACTACAM system is the TACTACAM camera, the actual sport camera I'm using, is their 5.0 model. They also make a cheaper Solo model, so the Tactacam Solo, which is also technically compatible with the FTS mount in that it will fit the FTS mount. However, I do want to share that it is not good with the FTS mount at all. The video quality, even though it is 1080p, it has a different sensor in it and it's completely washed out with the FTS mount. It's basically unusable. So if you do plan to use the TACTACAM system to film through your scope, you have to basically get the 5.0 camera, which is their most expensive camera at the moment. The TRIGGERCAM 2.1 here is a more purpose-built single unit design. So you can see the camera is permanently attached to the scope mount and it's a single piece. So you can't use it as a sport action camera. It's specifically designed to just film through your scope as is. Starting again with the big four factors of what I think are the most important to consider. That's going to be the video quality you can achieve with either of these systems, the glass quality of the mount, so the actual glass you look through to use your scope, how good is that glass, how you focus the reticle to the camera, and the last big factor is how much zoom is in the video footage that you get. So let's just start from the first one, which is going to be video quality. In this category, the TRIGGERCAM 2.1 definitely beats out the TACTACAM in almost every way. The video quality you get from the TRIGGERCAM is sharper, the details are better, and the colors look a lot better as well. The TACTACAM is no slouch. In fact, when I swapped over from the Solo, which was again horrible, to the 5.0, I was quite happy with the video footage. I'll also give you a little tip for the TACTACAM system if you're using it. I edit, render, and upload all my videos on YouTube in 1080p. So originally I was filming with the TACTACAM in 1080p. However, bumping it up to 4K improved the video quality substantially, and I gained a lot of detail by doing that. And overlaying that sharper video on my videos and rendering it in 1080, it looked a lot better. So just bump it up to 4K if you want the best image quality, and it actually does pretty good. So the TRIGGERCAM 2.1 is definitely better, but I wouldn't say the TACTACAM is a slouch. You can see a lot of detail, surprisingly, with the TACTACAM footage here. The next factor that I wanted to discuss here is the actual glass quality of the mounts themselves. So when you're using these systems, you're mounting the camera system to the back of your rifle scope, and in order to use your scope, you're looking through the mount to use your scope as normal. Anytime you put anything behind your glass, you're going to degrade the quality a little bit. And that is the case with these systems. If you think about it, the way these work is it reflects some light into the camera system upwards, and the remaining light travels back into your eyes. So the image is always going to be a little bit darker than if you weren't running this camera system. But I will say this is another big disadvantage of the TACTACAM system, unfortunately. The FTS mount has very poor glass quality, and it also has really bad reflections that come off of the glass. Side by side with the TRIGGERCAM, if you move it in the light, you can see that it reflects a lot more, and the TRIGGERCAM definitely has superior coatings on the glass. The first time I put the TACTACAM system on my scope, I was quite shocked at how much it actually degraded my image quality through the rifle scope. Unfortunately, it creates a very dark image as well as takes a lot of detail out of the scope image, which is quite unfortunate. My main competition rifle, I'm currently running a Minox 5-25 by 56 LR, which is a pretty nice scope and it has really good glass. However, you put something like the TACTACAM behind it and you basically lose all the advantage of the nice quality glass that you paid for. In conditions where I would normally be able to see my bullet flight, which is quite important for competition shooting because you can make a correction for your follow-up shots, with the TACTACAM system on the back of my scope, I was very rarely seeing my bullet flight, which was quite frustrating, especially since I was trying to use these at competitive matches where I wanted to do as well as possible. When I switched to the TRIGGERCAM 2.1, the first thing I noticed was just how much nicer the glass was to use. On a bright sunny day, you almost notice no degradation of your scope image at all, which is really great. On dimmer days, you will notice the image gets a little bit darker, but the clarity is still pretty good. They do have really nice coatings on this glass, and I can say it is miles above the TACTACAM system in terms of retaining your scope quality image to your eye. All right, the third big factor is going to be the way you focus the reticle of each system to the camera itself. So what I mean by that is when you have a rifle scope, you obviously have your diopter adjustment at the back, which is this ring, so you can focus the reticle of your scope to your eye. Once you adjust that, you usually don't have to touch it again unless your eye has a significant change in vision. But when you mount a camera system to your scope, that reticle that you focus to your eye might not be focused to your camera system. So you have to somehow focus the reticle to your camera system if you want the reticle to be nice and crisp in your video footage as well. This is another advantage for the TRIGGERCAM in this category because the TACTACAM has no way of focusing the reticle from your scope to the camera on the camera itself. You have to use the diopter setting on your scope in order to focus it to the camera, which usually is not going to be the same setting that works for your eye. Obviously, this is a huge issue because if you choose to focus your reticle to the camera, when you're looking through your scope, it's probably going to be blurry unless you're really lucky and it lines up to be the same setting that is good for your eye and the camera. When I was using the TACTACAM on my rifle scopes, I basically chose to put the focus of the reticle halfway between my eye and the camera to kind of get the best of both worlds, where you could still make out the reticle on the video footage and I could still read it well enough to use it in a match, but obviously that is not ideal whatsoever. So that's a big downside of using the TACTACAM system. The TRIGGERCAM system here has a separate focus wheel adjustment. So you can mount this onto your scope. Again, obviously the scope will already be adjusted to your eye. You can focus your camera to the reticle instead. So that's really great. Obviously, I can have really good reticle focus in the video while also retaining that reticle focus to my eye, which is crucially important when I'm shooting a match with my scope. The last thing I wanted to consider that I haven't really seen many people discuss online is the amount of zoom or crop in the image that you get from each of these camera systems, and the advantage of this factor actually goes to the TACTACAM system. The The settings that worked really well with the Tactacam in the FTS mount was no zoom and no camera stabilization, which is my preference for both of these. I think that the stabilization in the image looks really weird when you're filming through a scope because your crosshair will be sort of moving all over the place. You don't need image stabilization for this type of overlay footage in my opinion, and it's really nice because you can take out all the zoom in the Tactacam, which I'm pretty sure is just digital zoom anyway. So if you just don't use the zoom, turn it off using the application through the Wi-Fi, you can see your entire scope image as what you would see through your scope on camera, which is really nice because your viewers will see exactly what you see in terms of magnification and everything through your scope. Unfortunately, the TRIGGERCAM 2.1 has built-in optical zoom, which you cannot adjust. That means it crops into what you see in the scope, which is a big downside because I really like to try and show my viewers exactly what I'm seeing through my rifle scope as I'm shooting a match, and this cuts out a lot of the image. I never really noticed this in watching other TRIGGERCAM videos before, but after obviously editing my own footage and whatnot, it's something that has come to really bother me. The crop is quite severe. In fact, I usually like to run my scopes at anywhere between 12 and 15 times power when I'm shooting a match, and in that magnification range I can always see my full reticle at the bottom, what people often call the Christmas tree. In most of my scopes it maxes out at 10 mrad of elevation holdover in the bottom part of the reticle, so I can use that obviously to engage targets. When I'm using the TRIGGERCAM 2.1 at around 15 times magnification, this will crop my reticle to be at about 6 mils at the bottom of the image, which means if I go to hold over on a target any more than 6 mrad, it will not be on the video footage because it's cropped out. So that's a little bit disappointing. Obviously, you're not getting the same field of view in the video footage as I actually see through the scope, and I had some comments asking me why I was using such higher magnification all of a sudden to shoot my matches with, when really in reality it's just the cropped image of the 2.1 looks like I'm using a lot more magnification than I actually am in my rifle scope. So we just went over the 4 main features, or 4 big factors I would say that are most important to me anyway. You can see that 3 of the 4 big factors favored the TRIGGERCAM 2.1, and the zoom factor favored the Tactacam, where I can see the complete image through my scope. Because of that, I am going to stick with the 2.1 going forward. I wish there was no optical zoom built into it, but unfortunately you can't always have everything you want, but it does the other 3 substantially better than the Tactacam. So I will be trying to sell the Tactacam after I am done this video and sticking with the 2.1 going forward. However, I still want to go over the other features of each camera system because they are significantly different in other ways as well. So starting off just with the overall dimensions and weight, the Tactacam system with the battery inside and everything is substantially lighter than the TRIGGERCAM 2.1. On my scale, this came out to just around 10 ounces, which is fairly lightweight. It does have a lot more plastic construction or polymer construction than the TRIGGERCAM. The TRIGGERCAM is almost exactly a pound. It's all aluminum and it's definitely a bit heftier. So it is a substantial weight, especially when you consider the fact that people are playing with half-pound weights on their forend of their chassis and stuff to balance the rifle. Sticking a pound on the back of your scope does change things a little bit, but honestly, neither of them are too bad once you get used to it. Another thing I've seen people discuss online is how much each system actually protrudes out from the end of your scope. Obviously, your scope here has a certain eye relief, and putting a camera system on the back of your scope brings a lot of material closer to your eye, because the eye relief doesn't change from your scope to your eye when you put this camera system on the back of it, but you do add a lot of material. And there's sort of a misconception out there that the Tactacam system adds a lot more length to your scope. However, I found that that's not the case. I actually measured this quickly with a ruler taped to my cheek piece. I made sure that the edge of the ruler was flush with the back of my scope, and measuring each camera system mounted onto the scope, it turns out the Tactacam system is only about 4 millimeters longer hanging off the scope than the TRIGGERCAM 2.1, and that almost is entirely due to this little ring that protrudes out from the mount here. That's almost the entire difference of how much they stick out from the scope. So honestly, it's not a big difference at all. If you have a high recoiling rifle, you'd obviously want to decide if you even want to run a camera system like this on the back of your scope, because the last thing you want to get is scope punched by your rifle scope. That would obviously be no fun whatsoever. Talking about mounting the camera systems now, they both use a very similar method. They each come with a variety of different sized shims. I believe they come with 7 or 8 shims, each of them. And obviously, depending on the size of your rifle scope, this is a fixed diameter on the mount here. So you just use the shim to space out your rifle scope in order to fit your mount onto the rifle scope properly. This is not the right size shim here for the demonstration, but it's pretty straightforward. You just make sure you have the right size shim. You use a thicker shim for a smaller scope or a thinner shim for a fatter scope, and then you just mount the camera systems onto the scope using a clamp. Now the clamp on the two systems just use screws, which is pretty straightforward enough. The Tactacam system uses nice big screws, and there's 2 of them side by side. I really like this because it's quite a robust system. With such a large screw, you might have a temptation to over torque them, but as long as you're careful, I haven't had any issues whatsoever, and it's nice and secure. The TRIGGERCAM system here, I've never had issues with it coming loose or anything, but it unfortunately uses one very small screw here. I do have slight concerns that this screw might eventually wear out. I really hope it wouldn't strip, but it uses quite fine threads, and if you were to strip the female portion in the mount, you'd kind of be screwed. You'd definitely have to send this back for replacement or repair or something. I really don't like how small of a screw they used. I wish they had maybe increased the width of the clamping band and used 2 screws, as well as making them a little bit larger like the Tactacam system. Again, I haven't had any issues. It's just something I've noticed about the design, that it uses a pretty small screw here with pretty fine threads. So you want to be definitely very cognizant of how much torque you're putting into this screw when you're clamping it onto your scope. Talking about the general user interface of each camera, you have 2 buttons on the external of the Tactacam here, as well as 2 buttons on the external of the TRIGGERCAM here for all your functions. Both of these can link up to their appropriate applications in order to change additional settings, which you can't do on the camera. And going to the external of the Tactacam here, there is a sort of door on the back of here which locks with the tab. You twist it off and it exposes inside your SD card slot, a USB 3.0 for charging and data transfer, as well as a removable and replaceable battery compartment, which I am a big fan of. Again, to replace the cap, you simply just line up the little indexing tab, twist it on, and you can use this tab to lock it further into place. Both these systems, by the way, are weather sealed. I don't remember what exact waterproof rating they obtained, but each one I have used in the rain without any issues whatsoever. And what I really like about the Tactacam system is it actually has a battery level indicator with these 4 little lights. There's only 3 on right now because it's slightly dead, and you can use these buttons for different features. The TRIGGERCAM system here needs tools in order to open these ports, which I don't quite love. Again, this isn't a deal breaker whatsoever, but it's just kind of annoying. In a pinch, you could obviously use a coin or a flathead, but it comes with this little tool here that has these flats in order to use with these little port covers. Now each port cover is just a small disc with some threads on it. I believe there is a gasket around there for the weather sealing again, and you can open them both with this tool. And here you will see the functions. You have your SD card slot, USB 3.0 for charging and data transfer, as well as a micro HDMI, so you can actually hook this up to a monitor via the cable. And this rear port here is the reticle focus adjustment that I was talking about before. It's a little wheel that you can spin, and it'll focus the reticle to your camera, and obviously you would do that when you can see the image either on the app or through a monitor. So as you saw previous, the Tactacam does have an interchangeable battery, which I like a lot. You never know when you need an extra battery, stuff happens. And what's neat is you can actually buy extra batteries from Tactacam. Obviously you could just swap them in as you need, and you can buy little accessories like this. This is a charging holder, so it holds 2 Tactacam batteries. It's also a charger. You can plug it into a power source to charge them. The TRIGGERCAM 2.1 does not have a user replaceable battery, which is a huge downside for me. I always have to make sure it's topped up. And not only that, the battery indicator on the app doesn't work. It always shows 0% for me, which is another frustration because if I want to just check midday how the battery levels are doing, I have no idea. There's no way for me to check it. Now, this thing has never died on me during a one-day match, but I have no idea how much I've drawn the battery down because I have no way of seeing the battery level, whether on the camera or in the app as well. The Tactacam system, again, has a battery indicator on the outside, and the app works as it should with interchangeable batteries. So speaking of the phone applications, the Tactacam phone app is very well polished. It feels like a finished product. All the settings that you should be able to send to the camera work as normal, as it should. And I've never had any issues being able to see the camera footage so that when I mount it onto the scope first thing in the morning, I make sure that it goes on properly and that it's not canted in any weird way, giving some sort of scope shadow in the video footage. The TRIGGERCAM 2.1 phone app, unfortunately, feels like an unfinished product. There's a lot of settings that don't do anything. You'll try and toggle a setting on and off and the switch just doesn't do anything, which is quite an annoyance. I emailed TRIGGERCAM and they are aware of these issues. They say they're still improving the application, which is good, but right now it definitely feels like an unfinished product. The battery indicator in the app always reads 0%. So hopefully they fix that in the future. It should be a pretty easy fix. My biggest annoyance of the TRIGGERCAM app though is I've had a lot of issue trying to see live the footage from the camera. So again, when I go to mount this onto the scope, I want to make sure that it's not giving me any sort of horrible scope shadow so the footage is actually usable. And on my phone, which is an iPhone 8, it's quite old, you know, going on 5 years. I've never been able to link up properly the video footage onto my phone. And even on my wife's brand new Pixel, it's like a Google Pixel 4 or 5, whatever the new one is, I've had a lot of troubles as well. I have to reinstall the app a lot in order to get the live footage working. So it's just kind of an annoyance that the app hasn't been working smoothly. All right, so the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is just the cost and availability between these two products. The Tactacam system, at least here in North America, is fairly easy to find. Here in Canada, even Canadian Tire sells it, which is really nice. I bought mine online and the price is reasonable for what you get, in my opinion. I can't remember the exact price, but for this full system, I'll put it on the screen right now, what it costs. TRIGGERCAM is a smaller company. They're based out of South Africa and the pricing is in Rand. I don't know if they actually have any Canadian dealers, but everyone I know that has purchased a TRIGGERCAM has just purchased it straight from the South African company. Factoring in the conversion rate to their door with taxes, duties, and customs and everything, it's been just around $850 to 900 Canadian dollars, which definitely isn't cheap. Not only that, but it is a lot more difficult to find. The demand for these TRIGGERCAMs far outweigh the supply at the moment, so you can be put on a waiting list, but I've heard that some people have had to even wait months in order to get theirs. I was lucky enough that I purchased mine secondhand, so I want to thank Jonathan Ocab over on his channel for allowing me to purchase it off him, so I didn't have to wait. But just know the availability of the TRIGGERCAM is a lot more scarce than the Tactacam. But just a quick recap for my purposes in terms of how I use my cameras in my match settings. The winner to me is the TRIGGERCAM 2.1. However, it's far from perfect. It's mostly due to the fact that the glass quality allows me to still be competitive in my matches that I choose to use it. I think the Tactacam does a lot of things very well, but unfortunately, because of the glass clarity and the whole focusing your reticle to the camera, it's not a good option for me shooting matches with, but I think it's a very viable option if you want to use it for practice, or if you're not making videos for other people to look at, you want to just look at your own shooting performance and see if you can tweak some improvements here and there. I think the Tactacam is a great choice. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I know it was pretty comprehensive. I don't know how long it'll be after editing, but I'll try and cut as much rambling as possible. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them if you leave it in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Cheers.